Now let's bring in Texas Congressman and Budget Chief Jody Arrington to go along with Faulkner. Where are you, Faulkner? You're out there someplace in the ether zone. Anyway, we can do separate places. Chairman Jody Arrington, thanks for coming on set, particularly so. No, first point, I want to give Arthur Laffer a Nobel Prize. President Trump gave him a Presidential Medal of Freedom Award back in June 2019. Arthur Laffer's curve has predicted all these years that lower tax rates mean higher revenues, a combination of better economic growth and less tax avoidance. As happened. And ironically, even with ballooning deficits under Biden, it's mostly ballooning spending. Ironically, corporate tax revenues after the Trump tax cuts are up 26%. By the way, income tax cuts under Trump, those are up, I don't remember right the number, but 12%. So Laffer's right again. That, among other reasons, is he, I believe, worthy of a Nobel Prize. But I want to ask you, as a budget chief, everyone is saying that Trump's tax cuts will worsen the budget deficit. There's a big story in the Wall Street Journal this morning. And no one seems to understand the Laffer curve. You understand it. You can beat up on the CBO any old time you want. Let's talk about
Well, we have a blueprint to put the country and the people's government here in the United States on a path to balance. Central to that is growth. And you can't grow when you're thrusting the barrage of regulatory rigmarole on small businesses, the economic engine. You can't have your foot on the backs of the lifeblood of our economy, our energy producers, and you can't raise taxes, especially on the heels of COVID and the recovery that we have been trying to suffer to get back on our feet, but keep getting knocked down by dumb economic policies from this administration. So unleashing prosperity again with the same formula that
I love that phrase. I should have used it. Unleashing prosperity. I love that.
Well, it was unprecedented. The 2017 Trump tax cuts, along with deregulation, America First policies, and not paying people not to work, but incentivizing work-capable people to get back into the marketplace, taken together, gave us record revenues. And by the way, if we increase the GDP by 1%, that's $3 trillion towards deficit reduction. And about, I don't know, 20, I think, close percentage points from the debt to GDP, now at highest levels.
Which is really the key. You want to get debt to GDP down. You want to get deficits to GDP down, but you want to get them down in absolute terms. Just a quick question before I get Faulkner. Is your committee working on this balanced budget plan? Is it
twice.
Is it a broader effort?
We've passed it twice at a committee. We base it on James Madison's comment that a public debt is a public curse and the worst of its kind in a Republican form of government. Our founding fathers knew the sinister threats of debt. And as we look at conflicts in the Middle East, as we look at the natural disasters hitting our country, as we look at the misappropriation and misuse of monies where we're spending tens of billions on illegal immigrants instead of helping our fellow citizens, we've got to right-size this federal government. We've got to get rid of the COVID bloat. We've got to reform entitlements. We've got to root out the $236 billion in fraudulent spending in healthcare and welfare. Larry, it's a long list. It's all in the plan, and central again is growth.
All right, let's get Faulkner in here. Faulkner, you and that fancy think tank you work for, are you guys working on a balanced budget plan? As Chairman Jody Arrington is suggesting, it would be a pro-growth plan. It would include the tax cuts, but it would also have a sizable volume of spending. I'll call them savings or restraint, whatever. Actually, Mr. Trump on the campaign trail, recently has been talking about spending cuts, including, I might add, obligated but unspent, that misnamed Inflation Reduction Act. He's enlisted Elon Musk. I don't know whether you've had any contact with Musk, but that's going to be a spending restraint as well. And then you have the Laffer curve and the tax cuts. So, Faulkner, what are you cooking up?
Yeah, you've got all of that, Larry, plus add in, as you said, deregulation, unleashing American energy abundance.
Right.
And the combination of all of those things make us the most competitive place in the world to do business. If you have if you have a Kamala Harris corporate income tax increase, businesses are going to move abroad. Couple that with all of the regulations that she and Joe Biden have implemented, and you're making it difficult to do business here. If we unleash the American economy by having low-cost energy, a low-cost regulatory environment, lower taxes, a growing labor force because we're paying people to work instead of paying people to not work, the combination of those things can lift growth. And as Chairman Arrington said, if we can get another point per year out of GDP growth, that's $3 trillion over the budget window that we can use to pay for a lot of these things. Because if we can grow the base, we can have lower rates applied to it and still get record revenues, which is the record that we have had post-TICJA.
If you go from 2% growth, actually the long-run baseline is, I think, 1.8 from CBO and from the Federal Reserve. So let's just think of it as 2. If you go from 2 to 3%, which should not be difficult, which Trump experienced, by the way, for quite a part of his administration. He did better than that. At one point, he had 4%. If you do all that, you'd have your $3 trillion. And Jody Arrington, before we lose both of you guys, I just want to go back. When can you beat some sense into the Congressional Budget Office and the Joint Tax Committee, which, and I've been in this game, I was with the Fed during the 70s, I was with OMB in part of the 80s, and I was more recently in government. They have always gotten this wrong. They have never adopted anything like the Laffer curve. So you get these Goomba stories in the newspapers that Trump's tax cuts are what causing the deficit, not Kamala's spending, and not her tax. I mean, what would a $5 trillion tax hike do to the economy? Really? Seriously? $5 trillion? What would that do to the? You wouldn't get 2%. You'd get deep deficits in growth. I mean, it's -2, -4. Who knows what you'd get?
You're right. Look, that we know because we have the Joe Biden-Kamala Harris 10-year budget right alongside our budget that puts us on a path to balance.
What was her 10-year budget?
Her 10-year budget adds $17 trillion to the debt. It's the highest sustained levels of taxes, spending, and borrowing in the history of the country.
And she's at it again. She wants more of the same.
She wants more of the same. We can't be wedded to the CBO score. They were off by $1 trillion over 6 years.
They're always wrong.
On the tax cuts.
They scored Trump's corporate tax as a big revenue loser. So now, look, again, from the newspaper this morning, we're still inside the 10-year window, which is how they score these things. That's right. And we are still producing huge revenue surpluses from his corporate tax cuts, and they won't acknowledge it. Each year they make long-term projections. They have been wrong every single year. And no, it's a scandal. Somebody should do something about the Congressional Budget Office, that's the official government scorekeeper, or the Joint Tax Committee, which is their little sidekick, and they're always wrong also. Last word. Do something. You're going to be chairman again? Slam him. Go after him.
Well, listen, we can do what we think's right, and we have a lot of external validators. In fact, Goldman Sachs here said that the Green Energy Corporation tax subsidies that came out of the so-called Inflation Reduction Act were only going to cost $200 billion.
Yes, didn't you love that?
And instead, it will be closer to $1 trillion.
Of course.
So wrong again. So let's do what we know to be right. You talked about Art Laffer and the Laffer curve. Let's make the investment in growth. Let's get some of the government burden off the backs of the guys.
Arthur needs the Nobel Prize. You can do anything about that. It's a little late. It's going to come out next week, but you should pitch in on that. In all seriousness, okay, we got to get it. But in all seriousness, the CBO and the Joint Tax Committee, the official government scorekeepers, need to be changed completely, top to bottom. I mean that sincerely. I mean, we were in those tax cuts for 2017. There's a 10-year window for scoring. All right, we're not there yet. This is 24. It's not 27. They are completely wrong thus far in mounting cumulative ways. They are wrong. Somebody should just, if you get them to testify in front of your committee, you put up a sign. Here's the numbers. A big poster, put it up on a stand. They're always wrong. This is one of my pet peeves. Their scoring is not dynamic. It is not Laffer curve. I've got to get out. Mike Falkender, Congressman Jody Arrington, thank you ever so much. We appreciate it. All right, folks, coming up.